Welcome to episode 17 of the Wheels and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Ben Durham, and let's jump right into it this time. Who are you?
I'm Fred Chagnon. I'm a local cyclist, mostly recreational. People know me around the city as somebody who bikes with the London Cycling Club. I'm a long distance cyclist. Something I'm renowned for, I think, is the participation in Randonneuring, which is something that I do, and I hold sessions on to get people into that. And I volunteer in a lot of capacities around the city. With the slow roll, for example, I've marshaled that event 2 years in a row. So I like to be involved where I can in the community where cycling's involved.
So I have mentioned this throughout the podcasts so far, that I primarily target, at least for hosts or for guests of the podcast, not recreational, but utility cyclists. So That's what I would classify myself as well. Right after this, I'm going to do a few errands on the cargo bike, et cetera. But what really intrigued me is that you are, I would say, more of a MAMIL. Would you classify yourself as that? Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm middle-aged. I'm a man, and often in Lycra, or I don't know what that stuff is made of. But yeah, I fit that bill. I'm that guy.
Okay. It's funny. I was going to actually ask, because I've never looked this up, the difference between spandex and Lycra. Do you know? Or
I actually don't even know what Lycra is. Pretty sure that the material that I wear when I want to be, less resistant is Lycra, but I don't know. All I care about is that it's sweat wicking and relatively cool.
Then the next most interesting thing, because of your classification as a recreational cyclist, that I found, was that even though you're a hardcore cyclist who has a fairly tolerant risk level, correct? Like you're, what would you classify yourself as?
If we're using that scale, we all know, LTS 4, so.
And can you explain that scale to me, or?
Right. I don't know that I can define it as the, NACTO defines it, but let's just say that I've been in some pretty hairy situations that I don't willingly go into, right? But I mean, like traffic. So in Randonneuring, for example, this is a discipline of cycling where we're required to follow a really long route, but it's not marked and there's no police blocking intersections. We just follow this route, and it can take us into areas where there could be heavy traffic, or maybe it's at night, because we'll often ride through the night. So this requires a level of comfort of riding that is, we're self-sufficient. We don't want to ride through the night, so I'm comfortable, at any time of the day. Sometimes we'll get into an area where we're in the middle of rush hour and we happen to be in a town and it's very busy. So I'm comfortable squeezing through very thin lanes of traffic if that's what's needed. These are not situations I would choose to put myself in, but if that's where I am, I can be comfortable. I just wouldn't willingly go, well, it's rush hour now, time for my bike ride, right? So yeah, I would say my confidence level is high, but that doesn't mean that I willingly put myself into high stress situations.
Exactly. Before we dive further into that, I think there was an incident 1 or 2 years ago with a black pickup truck on a group ride. Yeah. And were you involved? Can you tell me a little bit more?
I was on the ride. I was not in that group. So what happened is, the London Cycling Club, we do our touring rides every Sunday, and we'll leave in three distinct groups that just set at different pace levels, right? So, we call it fast, medium, not as fast as medium. I don't use the word slow. So, but we were headed to the same destination, right? Go out for ride, go out for coffee, have a coffee, and come back. Pretty typical Sunday ride. So I was in the lead group, and so I was already at the destination when we were notified that the group behind us had an incident, right? And so what had happened there was that the black pickup truck you mentioned had come in and wanted to spook the group, just as they do, because, cyclists are on the road and, he didn't want to totally overtake them, or maybe was offended by the fact that he would have to, and just thought he would use his big vehicle to intimidate the group. Well, what happened was he struck the two cyclists at the front of the group, right? And then, of course, took off after that. And and one of them broke his collarbone. The other one broke fractured his cheekbone. Right, so they've since healed, and that guy was caught and was, the court case was just a couple months ago, so he was convicted, right? So everything's resolved there, but that's the risk of going in. So we heard about that in the lead group, and of course that creates a very somber ride home for everybody in the entire ride.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
Sorry, no, go on.
Well, so I mean that. Those types of situations, it's not supposed to be high stress, right? We're in a country road. There was very little traffic, but the high stress situation happens when you can hear that vehicle approaching from behind, and you can tell that they're not actually out a meter and a half, because the sound's coming from directly behind you, and that's what creates, that environment. There's really nowhere to go when that's happening.
Yeah. So, okay. When people say, so in that situation, when people say, the drivers, and I have to say this, the black pickup truck was driven by a human being. And so like when we say, oh, the black pickup truck, it's like, okay, well, yeah, it's always a driver that causes a problem. Like that's what we're talking about here. Identified by the black pickup truck, which is a stereotypical vehicle of choice of lesser quality drivers. We're gonna go with.
That's right.
It's not everyone, but it is a large percentage of those. Okay, so what I was gonna get at there is the drivers who say, "Hey, why can't you hug the shoulder?" Your whole group. Right. Can you explain to me why taking the entire lane two abreast is actually beneficial for drivers?
Okay, let's use the example of a group of 6 cyclists, right? So nice common number. We could be riding either as a single file line, so one line of 6 cyclists, or we could be riding 2 abreast, so where you have 3 rows of 2 cyclists. Okay, so in the first scenario, if we recognize that the proper way to pass this group is to cross over at least halfway, but we would prefer you take the whole lane. But you're going to have to cross over into oncoming traffic to get by this group, right? So the question is, would you rather pass 6 cyclists or 3? Right? So if we're riding 2 by 3, so 2 abreast, we're actually creating a shape, a structure that's doesn't take as long to pass. So the vehicle that's passing is actually in the oncoming lane for less time. And so that's safer for them. It's also safer for the cyclists because they're now being passed much quicker. Now, there is an exception. There is a time when we would choose to ride in that single file line. And that's if we're on a road where oncoming traffic is quite busy. Right. And that creates a situation where it's difficult for the car to make that pass in the oncoming lane. Right. So in that case, it's better for the cyclists to ride in a single file line, which allows the car to not squeeze by, because they still need to they still need to leave a lot of space. But it gives them it's easier for them to get through in that case. And yes, it does take them more time. Another scenario is if the road is particularly hilly. And so then the driver can't see oncoming traffic, right? So then in those, in hilly terrain, it's also preferred that the cyclists ride in single file or in terrain that's quite twisty, right? But basically, if you can see up the road, if you have a clear shot up the road and there's no oncoming traffic, that's when the group of cyclists will tend to ride 2 abreast, and that we would expect the vehicles to just simply pass. Because they have a clear view that no one's coming. So safer for all.
So that is actually a much better explanation than I ever would have been able to just come up with, because you have experience doing that. And also, is it that when you're 2 abreast, this is not a safety thing, but are you often chatting, or are you focused on your breathing, etc.?
Well, I think that depends on the group, right?
Okay.
If you're riding in a social group, it's quite social, and that's why we want it. It's another reason we want to ride 2 abreast, right? So we can get out, and we're all sharing in the activity, but it's a social activity. It's possible that you could find yourself in a group that's really training, and they're really out there for fitness. In which case, they're probably not riding at a conversational pace, and that's fine. They can just huff and puff and take turns up front and do what they're doing to get their workout in. But at slower paces, we want it to be conversational. That's why we ride. I always tell people, when we're advocating for group riding, right? Why do we ride in a group? We ride in a group for safety, which we just discussed. So we are safer when we're all together, right? So again, if that group of 6 cyclists is all spread out and kind of not in a nice structure, it's very unpredictable for the driver. They don't know at any given time where the cyclist might go. It takes longer to pass them if they're all kind of in a gaggle, right? But if they're tight and in a formation, that's much safer and much more predictable, right? In a lot of ways, they become like a vehicle, right? So it's safer to ride in a group. It's more social, right? So we enjoy it more, and it's actually more efficient. You could say faster, but I prefer to say it's just more efficient because, if you're in front of me, you're blocking the wind for me, right? Which means you're working harder than I am. But then we'll rotate, and now it's my turn to do the work, and you get to recover, and so we can work together to create a more efficient ride as a group.
And that's drafting, right?
That's drafting.
Okay.
Yeah. So as a group, we can actually get somewhere more efficiently working together like that. That's how it works usually on a paved road. If we're off on a gravel road, gravel rides have a bit of a different vibe, right? because now on that terrain, we actually can't ride as close together because I want to be a little bit more mindful of little ruts and potholes and things like that. So I need a bit more space. I need a larger bubble around me. We tend to slow down. There's not as much traffic. So you will find a gravel group does kind of get into a little less structured, a little more of a gaggle. And it's much more social, and it's kind of like, I find it when we're on those sort of mixed multi-surface rides, like when we get on gravel, everybody kind of breathes a sigh of relief and just kind of like chills out. And then we get on road and it's tight structure and all business and heads down and let's do the work. But that's just how they differ.
Okay, so with all of that context of kind of who you are as a cyclist and like what type of cycling you do, so you know how to operate on the road. And
yeah,
this was why I really wanted to talk with you, because we were like, okay, well, I was reaching out, hey, would you like to be on the podcast? And you're saying that, I don't know if the words were intimidated, but I'm going to go with, you were almost like intimidated by all of the other badass people that are the moms and the utility cyclists and the people who are out there leaving their bikes locked to a signpost to go in and get groceries, etc. And so, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think I called myself a failed utility cyclist.
And I was like, "Aw," but can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So when I say that, what I mean is so whenever I'm not cycling, right? Whenever I'm in the car doing something, or just walking doing something, I ask myself, like, why am I not on my bike, right? Because I like being on my bike, and I'm really happy when I can run to the store and get something on my bike and get home. It's like I feel like I won something.
It's like a rush.
So I check in a lot about why am I not cycling now? And I have a lot of reasons for why that doesn't happen. Because I do find that there are a lot of times where I'm just like, nope, I didn't take the bike here, and I could have. Ben would be so disappointed in me.
But there's reasons for it, and this is what we're here for. Because again, you're assertive with your cycling, and we already went over that. So
one of the reasons, if we can talk about infrastructure, right? So one of the reasons is it's too hard to get to where I want to go safely. And so then you might say, well, but Fred, you were biking in rush hour Quebec in a rainstorm in the hurricane in August. That was some pretty insane traffic. So why are you afraid to cross London? Right? And my answer is, why should I? Like, why would I willingly put myself in that situation? So like I was saying before, I'm okay when I'm in the situation. I can get through it. I just don't choose it. So if the question is, like, for example, today on my lunch break, I had to run an errand. I had to run out to Hamilton Road and back. I could have biked in today knowing that I had that errand to run on my lunch break. But that's just not to get from where we are here, because I work right around the corner.
And we are so you're right around the corner, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
And we're at the London Bicycle Cafe.
So we're downtown London.
Downtown. Yep.
So my errand was at Hamilton Road, Outspoken Cyclist, right? So that would have had me going through downtown, down Hamilton Road, stop, park my bike for 20 minutes, and then come back. I could probably traverse that in under an hour, but it's just not my favorite kind of riding. Right. And And so there's two situations there. Number one, there's the pathway to get to Hamilton Road. And by the way, I passed 2 ghost bikes on my way there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little reminder that this is not where I want to actually be choosing to ride my bike. And then there's the situation, where am I going to park my bike on Hamilton Road for 20 minutes? Right? And yeah, I could have locked it to something and it probably would have been fine. But it's, the bike I have is not the bike I want to lose. Right. And I don't like this idea that, well, if I'm going to be riding around downtown, I should get some cheap beater bike that I don't mind getting stolen, because I've actually tried to do that twice. The first, I once, I tried to tackle that situation where I'm like, okay, I'll just get a bike that's sort of my about town bike that I don't care about. My problem with that is I end up really caring about these things.
Well, because you own the thing. Like, you're going to set it up the way you want it. So then you're like I'm assuming you're putting accessories on it. You're putting the fenders on it.
That's what happened the first time it became a project, right? So I came into a frame on Facebook Marketplace. I'm like, yeah, that's perfect. I'm going to build that frame into something that I can take around town, and then I don't have to use my expensive road bike or my mountain bike or whatever that my recreational machines. I can just use this thing. It'll be my utility bike. And I loved it. I made it was single speed. That was something I wanted to try, right? I wanted to be one of those utility single speeders. Those are cool people, right?
I'm still very tempted by the simplicity of single speed bikes. I don't know how practical it would be for my usage, but I'm still very tempted. I can see why.
So I built up this thing, and I loved it. And I had the same misgivings about parking it anywhere that I have with any of my other bikes. And so it didn't end up sort of bridging that gap, right? So I recognize this is probably something I feel much more strongly about than I think a lot of people who are comfortable locking their bike to a tree or a signpost or a fence or whatever. It's just not something I'm comfortable with. Having had bikes stolen from a mall, from my garage, it's just something that I have that I can't let go of. So another thing that prevents me from running errands by bike is that parking situation. Right? Even in where I live in Byron, right, which is very sort of car dependent but safe suburban neighborhood in London, I'm often going out to plazas to run errands, right? So I need cat food, or I need milk, or somebody wants to we need some takeout food or something like that. These are all errands that I could run by bike. Oh, Fred, can you go get a bottle of wine? So-and-so is coming over. Sure, no problem. And I can carry wine on my bike without breaking the bottle. But when I get to that plaza, I don't want to park my bike on that little metal thing outside the grocery store for 20 minutes. What I would like to do is, we have 3 of those bike lockers in London. I would love to use one of those, and I would pay $5 to do that, or whatever the price is, right?
The funny thing is, those are actually to incentivize their usage. So they're downtown. There's 3 of them, and they are free for the first 2 hours, and then they're 50 cents an hour. 50 cents an hour,
and I thought when they came out with that price, it was just let's just get people using them, and then eventually they would add a fee structure, right? Yeah, it hasn't happened yet, which is I'm still happy about, but. I'm just saying, I would for the security of the ride, I would, just like I pay for gas, I would pay for that. So that's, and it's not just me. It's also, within my family, I'll often, because everybody in my house rides a bike, right? Whether recreationally or not.
And how many people is that?
For a family of 4.
Mm-hmm.
So my eldest son, right? He's 20. He works 2 jobs, right? One of them's here at the bike cafe, so he can bike here. All right, and you can park outside the bike cafe. There's lots of eyes on that parking situation. So
including his, you can see it from right here.
That's right. So I like that option for him, right? Especially in the summer when the patio's open, even more eyes on that bike. His other job is at Masonville Mall, and he asked me the other day. He had a shift starting at 7 a.m. and he said, hey, Dad, do you think you could give me a ride to work, or should I bike? And I'm like, well, if you want to get there for 7 a.m., right, it's about an hour bike ride, which is, it's not too bad. Because you can get to Masonville Mall pretty safely along the Thames Valley Parkway. Lights on the bike because, of course, we're in November, so it's dark at 7 a.m. But other than that, you should be fine. Except you get to the mall and you've got a 6-hour shift. Where are you going to park your bike for 6 hours? Right? Are you going to park it right outside entrance 1? Sure, if you want to take the bus home.
Entrance 1 is, so I usually go near the Silver City. Is that Where's entrance 1?
I think you can park your bike at any entrance. But
yeah, we go in for like an hour, but we are always worried coming out because that is the ideal place for a locker.
That's
right?
where when I see stolen bike reports, it's usually mall plazas, Walmart plazas, things like that.
Because the thieves know that you're going to be in there for a while.
That's right.
So, yeah.
That's right. And so, yeah, I'm just like, I'll give you a ride because that's the option. So again, like a mall parking lot is a perfect place to support, I call it 10 spots to securely park a bike for a long shift. Or in this case, I mean, the mall could offer employee parking in a locker, right? To incentivize the employees of the mall to not have to drive to their jobs or take, early morning transit or whatever. So like, I would like to see parking for everybody, but at the very least, it would be nice to have an employee option. Because I did ask, is there anywhere, within the malls that the employees can bring their stuff? And he has no idea. So, and there probably isn't. But that's usually the other option is, can I bring my bike into where I'm working?
Yeah, I've been recording these calls too. I actively now, before going somewhere, we went out to a bar and grill for this weekend with friends. And Natalia and I were like, oh, we'll just take the cargo bike. And I looked on Google Maps, really hard to find because it was so far deep.
I often do that. I'm using Google Maps to scout for bike racks, or is there a patio? Or
exactly, yeah. And I'm like, okay, they said patio, or this was after. I'm like, okay, patio. I can't even get to look at the front because the roadway from the Google Street View car.
Yeah, I think I see some wooden fencing back there. It should be okay.
Yeah, it's like so far away that I had to zoom in on the pixels. I'm like, okay, I can't do this. So then I called up and I said, hi, we're coming tonight at 6, and where can we park our bicycles or bicycle? And they're like, sorry, like a motorbike or a bicycle? A bicycle. It's like, okay. Out front? I'm like, okay, are there bike racks? No. What? Okay. Yeah. What do you mean by park out front?
Yeah,
my just company, there's no computational like.
My company had their summer party at Port Stanley, right, beach town nearby, right, and so I thought, well, that would be great. I'm just going to ride there to the party. I'll ride my bike, and then a couple others kind of they're like, hey, why don't we organize a ride there, right? So a bunch of us were like, hey, let's ride our bikes to the summer party. And then I called the place and I said, hey, we got about 6 or 7 people that are going to be riding from London. Do you think we could park our bikes inside your restaurant? And they're kind of like, you can just leave them outside. And I said, well, are there bike racks outside? Because I don't see any from Google Maps. And like, no, people ride outside or park outside all day, right? But this was our summer party, right? So we were going to be arriving, and then we were just going to be along the beach playing volleyball and doing sort of all these activities in the area for 4 hours or whatever it was. So all I wanted was just a place indoors, right, where somebody would have to walk in and choose my bike amongst the 6.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially when you're in a smaller area or like a beach area, a truck can just come by and just
throw them on.
Yoink, because you're nowhere nearby. And you come back, you're like, oh, great. My only mode of transportation and everyone else is gone. And it's in the back of a truck and you're not getting that back. Like that's gone.
So like back to the residential neighborhood, like all I'm hoping for is that we get to a place where these, sort of plaza owners or business owners recognize that there are more ways to get to the business than just driving there, right? So we have minimum parking requirements, but we don't have any minimum requirements for anything else. And just a little bit of education about the belief that just sticking a metal post into the sidewalk near the entrance is enough for anybody who wants to ride a bike. Because it's not. It's deterring me. It's deterring a lot of people who like me from using that option. And it doesn't mean that I don't go there, right? It means that I'm a car on the road. And that's really what we're trying to, provide alternatives for.
I keep on coming back to this as the thesis for this podcast. And what's happening is if you, of all people, aren't doing these utility cycling trips, then how do we expect people who are way more risk adverse to do it? Like that's why I'm having this conversation, because holy, if we can't get you to, then what the heck? How, like,
That's
everyone
right.
else also has these problems.
They have these. So if I didn't have a car, the difference between me and somebody who's much more risk averse would be I would probably do it, except that I would be putting myself into danger. And right now I have the ability, the privilege to choose not to put myself in that danger, right? So the infrastructure is as we know is at times incomplete, right? Earlier we were talking about Southdale Road, right? As you were setting up, we were talking about Southdale Road, right?
Yeah, again, I have errands to do right after this. I'm gonna
we're doing what every cyclist does. Kind of look at the map and go, hey, how do I get there? If I stitch this road with this road, like, when we get into a car, we don't do that. Right? We know that the roads are complete. The network is complete. Oftentimes, I haven't thought about how I'm going to drive to where I'm going until I actually leave my neighborhood and I'm in my car. When I get on a bike, I have to think about how am I going to get there? What am I going to wear? How long is it going to take? Where am I going to park? How secure is that? Do I have all that stuff with me? So we have to plan everything. And I'm not saying, I don't actually even expect to get to a world where I just have to, hop on my bike and then I'm going to leave my neighborhood and then I'm going to think, oh, and how am I actually going to get there? I just want to know that the network is as complete as the car network is. So when I'm going down Southdale, like if you go the west end of London, Southdale Road, recently under construction. So the bike path is beautiful, right? So this is, but what, if people look at that, as they often do, right, there's nobody using that bike path. Well, that's because the next block hasn't gone under that reconstruction and it just swings you right back into traffic. But someday, when they do rebuild that section of the road, I imagine that bike path is going to continue. So someday, in the next 15 years, there's going to be a really nice bike path all the way down Southdale. And that's what you would use 15 years from now when you have to run that same errand. We're just not there yet. This whole thing is a work in progress. So to look at a bike path today and see no cyclists on it, right? Follow that path and see where it goes. And you'll often laugh where it ends, right?
In the middle of a 4-lane road just dips you out or something like that. Yep. I always say, I don't know if this is a great analogy, but I've been saying it for a while. It's like building a road in the middle of a cornfield with no connections and then saying, well, it's not being used. What the heck?
Nobody's using it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's not where people want to go. They want to go to a downtown or something. And also, how do you get to it with your vehicle? And it's like, what? What?
So it's patchwork and it's a work in progress. And if we had perfect infrastructure in London that could take me where I want to go, that would put me on my bike a lot more, right? I would be less of a failed utility cyclist. If then we also had the parking situation, where I have options to securely park my bike for long durations, right? That's another thing, right? The other deterrents like weather and things like that are actually more personal issues, right? Like these are not things that I need a community to solve, right? I can dress for the cold. Like I said, I bike through the night and it gets cold at night. So I have all that. That's fine. I have lights. I have all that. I just need lanes and I need parking. And everything else, I can carry as much as I can carry, right? Sometimes that's a problem. I can't transport people on my bike when I have to drive people around. That's the other reason I'm not on my bike. But yeah, the biggest things are like everybody knows, it's infrastructure and it's parking. And both of those, I have risk aversions too. Like I don't choose to ride on dangerous roads, and I don't choose to lock my bike to places where I'm not sure it's going to be there when I get back. And I'm also obviously not unwilling, but just seem to be incapable of getting a cheaper bike that I wouldn't actually be attached to. Because the problem is, I like bikes, and I think I would like any bike that I would ride. And also, as an enthusiast, I'd probably continually upgrade that bike so that it's something really enjoyable to ride, because I don't really want to ride a cheap bike. And guess what? Now it's something that's worth being stolen, and it's going to hurt my feelings when that happens.
I have to say, so I fully agree with you, because my experience for the majority of my life is what I would say the most Canadian experience is. You get a Canadian tire, or your parents get you a Canadian tire mountain bike. What the heck? Why is it a mountain bike? Don't know, because it's super cheap, falls apart, needs a lot of maintenance, and it's not even fun
has
to
a
ride.
disclaimer saying that it's not suitable for trails.
Yeah, it's like, don't use this for what this is called. Like the name of it is incorrect. And the tires are rubbish, and they have a lot of rolling resistance. There's no fenders. There's all these problems. There's full suspension for some reason.
Well. Yeah.
They're heavy because of the full suspension, which is just ridiculous to have, seeing as you're going over.
I could get a bike like that today for $300.
Yep. And it's like, but you wouldn't want to ride it, which I think a lot of people think that is biking. And when you actually get a real bike, like, which a lot of people never actually get to.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to ride. The rolling resistance is so low. You pedal and you're halfway down the street.
They just sail, right? It feels like flying. And when you go to shift gears, right? It shifts properly. It's not supposed to go 4 or 5 revolutions around the pedal crank before the chain finds its place, right? That's not normal. So I've been spoiled by that, right? That's what I get for being an enthusiast. And so then, what happens is any bike that I'm going to choose to ride is going to, have to meet, I guess, those minimum expectations. And those are the things that I'm not going to want to just lean up against a building. Now, I recognize that puts me in a very small percentage, right? And I'm not asking the world to solve the problem of the, 1% of cyclists that are enthusiasts that have, expensive tastes. But I think what'll happen is if we do actually start providing more accessibility to this greater problem, more people will choose this mode of transportation. And, again, gets cars off the road, provides a better way to get around.
Yeah, and it actually does affect not only, let's say, depending on your socioeconomic level, it actually affects everyone. So all of the reasons that you're bringing up, it's like, hey, I have this Canadian Tire bike. As much as I bash them, it's like, hey, this was cheap. I'm going to use it. Perfect. It could see thousands of kilometers over its life. And really, you then could save so much more by having being forced to own a vehicle. If that's the case, well, you still want to have a bicycle when you leave the grocery store. Like, it still affects, like, no matter how expensive your bike is, that's your mode of transport.
It's your mode of transportation.
Yeah.
It's your lifeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're going for a lesser bike, let's say a kid is like, oh, well, okay. Like, I actually have experience locking up my bike with a cable lock for my college years. I would bike down the big Fanshawe Park Road hill, and I would lock up my my Canadian Tire mountain bike with a cable lock. I never got stolen. It was at the bay, the entrance there. I don't know how. And then I'd walk over to the bus and take the bus, the 90, right downtown. It was honestly amazing. And just a few months prior to that, I would drive down the hill. And then I was like, hold up. I would drive 2 kilometers, hit traffic, wait, and I'm staring at this bike lane that has been there for a long time. It actually is in Boulevard, and it's actually protected. And I was like, I'm sitting there in traffic, and I'm like, huh.
You could be right there.
I'm like, why don't I just, especially, I can sweat on the way back up the hill, but I'm sailing down the hill to get out of the house. I'm like, oh. And then I started doing that. I was like, okay, I'll just do that. I had quick release wheels. I don't know how it did it. Like, no one ever stole that thing. It saw tens of thousands of kilometers. And then that is the same, I don't know how this happened. It's the same bike I turned into an e-bike and then put another 10,000 kilometers, according to Strava, in Toronto. Like, but I like, for a Canadian Tire bike, again, you can make them work. I did what you did. I upgraded the heck out of it. I put fenders on and lights and this and that, and suddenly it was not a $300 bike.
Yeah. And therefore a pleasure to ride.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would do the same. If I started with a $300 bike, there are certain things that I would just do to it over time that would just make it a joy to ride. Really, it's just a frame with parts on it. They can all be replaced. Yeah, I think a lot about kids riding bikes. It's in June, I think, is like, International Ride to School Day or week. I think it's a week. So, so my younger son, he's 16 now, but when he was in sort of grade 7, 8, he wanted to do this. And so the first thing I did, I rode with him to school on the weekend, so he would know the path. And so we got to his school and he knew where the bike rack was, and then we rode home. And so then he was fine. He was fine doing it. And most of it was on the Thames Valley Parkway multi-use path. And I showed him the way through the neighborhood to get there. And so he actually like had a good bike commute now, in grade 7, 8. When he got to his school, he couldn't fit his bike into the bike rack, right? Because he has a 29-inch tire mountain bike that didn't fit into the 1985 bike rack thing.
That are still standard somehow for the 26-inch tires.
That's right. That's right. So he locked his bike to the side of the bike rack. The other two bikes that were there, it's International Bike to School Week, so there were 2 other bikes there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So impressive.
Yeah. So he wasn't, because really, if everybody does what he does, is this bike rack could hold 2 bikes. Thankfully, the other 2 bikes fit in the little wheel bender area. So he locked his bike there, and he was a little upset that his bike incurred some scratches from the bike rack after having been locked through that week. He was like, first he thought I was going to be really upset with him. Dad, my bike's got some scratches from the bike rack. And I was like, good, it's being used. I love it. I was
going to say those exact words. Yeah. Good, it's being used. That's my favorite thing.
It looks like you're using it to get yourself to school. Like, good on you. That sort of brought his comfort level down. It was much better. But what I was thinking about a lot that week was, what if every child rode their bike to school? And we looked at the reasons why that can't happen or won't happen. And then we started to tackle those problems, right? So a bunch of those problems would be like, I don't have a bike. Okay. Why don't kids have bikes? Obviously, because they're expensive or hard to get, or I live in an apartment and I don't know where I would put it. Right. So there are a bunch of issues there around bike ownership or accessibility to a bike, right, which we could solve.
Along with the fact that they are seen as recreational devices, I think is another one. It's like, right. You don't need that toy.
You don't need that toy, except that we've just created the rule that all kids now must bike to school. So now it's not a recreational toy anymore. It's now a, I don't know how to get to school. Okay. So that's a solvable problem. Because if you had to walk to school, you would know how to get to school too, right? Or my school is not in an accessible neighborhood. Infrastructure, obviously. Parking, I mean, like I just said, the bike rack parking at school, first of all, isn't enough for like a classroom of students, let alone the entire school. The bike racks have issues. We went to some schools in London where I could not find a bike rack. I'm not going to name them right now. There are schools that have no bike racks. And if you look at where those schools are, you'll understand why they don't have bike racks, because you would never bike to those locations anyway. You couldn't get there. So that would be a challenge we would have to solve. So there's all these challenges, but I just thought if we made, it's my belief that that's what Bike to School Week is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about trying to get kids to bike to school so that we can bring awareness to the fact that they could, right? And that's what it did for my son. It made him realize he could bike to school. But now he goes to high school and he can't bike to school because of challenges, right? One of them is I don't think his school has a bike rack. And if it does, he doesn't know where it is. And it also takes him a long, because it's high school, right? So it's less sort of neighborhood centric. It's more like center of the city, harder to get to, takes a lot longer. And now that he's much more of a cycling enthusiast, he has the same challenge I do, where his bike is worth more than leaving it in the schoolyard for 6 hours while he goes and learns. So he has that challenge too. But if we solve those, so, secure parking, add that to the list of why kids can't bike to school. But if we could just tackle those problems in the order that they sort of come up, right? Parents might say, well, I don't feel safe, but, putting my kid on the road. Let's solve that problem. Then what we would do by solving this challenge for kids is create an entire world for adults that would make it a lot easier to get around their neighborhood and solve a lot of their challenges and normalize getting around by bike. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that normalization that is sort of at the root of all of these issues. It's seen as alternative, right? It's not normal. And why do we accommodate the alternative, right? Why do we? It's an exception. And if we could basically generate some momentum around the idea of it not being the exception, but being an acceptable and normal alternative, then I think it's a problem we start to solve for.
Yeah, because what you're saying, and earlier said, oh, I can carry a bottle of wine, I can do this. You can't bike all the time. We get it. We
Right.
try. It's very fun to try to do large loads, etc.
I always have to have a reason not to.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And so that's totally fine. There are, for those without vehicles, there's delivery services. There's always other ways. You don't necessarily need a car. Yes, it's convenient, especially when everything is designed that way. But I'm also, and you're saying the same thing. You would like to not have to drive. And
Right.
so same with the kids, though. It's like, hey, I would love to not have to drive the kid to school.
I'd love to not have to drive you, right?
Yeah, or to work, like the Masonville story.
That's right.
It's like,
yeah.
It's like, come on, like it's actually beneficial to everyone. And that's one less car going to and there 4 times in your case, because you have to drop him off unless he can take a bus back, etc. Like you're on the road 4 times when you're dropping him off.
Yeah, in that case, it was just the one trip, because he can't take the bus home. It was just that to get there that early in the morning, right? The bus doesn't run as frequently, so he's basically waiting for the bus stop at the crack of dawn. Right. So that's all. Yeah. But still, one car on the road, right? I'm all alone coming back.
Yeah, it's just a single occupancy vehicle, and that's that. And yeah, so it really is just when you're going to get that bottle of wine, or yesterday we picked up a pizza, and then the day before that we picked up a few other things. You make more frequent trips, so a bag of apples and a bag of potatoes and just different things. Every a few days you're like, oh right, we need to top up on this. Those don't have to be a big Costco run, which we do quarterly-ish.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's just about different options.
Yeah, and so and I think that's why it's surprising to you, but even to me, that somebody who accumulates 10,000 kilometers of recreational riding a year, right? So I'm on my bike a lot, but the times that I want to be just getting around, just the normal stuff, are the times I can't be.
Like that Hamilton road trip.
Like the Hamilton road trip, right? I was just picking up like 2 things that would have fit in my back pocket. This was not an errand that required a vehicle.
Like the size of a flash drive or something. Yeah,
that's right. And in terms of time, like I could have squeezed that into my lunch break, particularly if it was a lot easier to travel by bike. But even going in sort of doing the vehicular cycling, I still could have. It would have taken a bit longer, but not so long that it would have been like, no, I really need to use a car for that.
So again, it's on the bounds where it's like, okay, it could be more convenient to take the vehicle, but in this one case, you're like, well, I'll just bike because why not? And so then you would again be one less vehicle, and that's that. However, earlier you mentioned you passed 2 ghost bikes. For those people who don't know that, would you like to elaborate, or I can?
Hamilton Road has been fraught with peril in the last couple of years, and I'm sorry right now that I don't know the names of the individuals.
Yes.
But there have been 2 notable deaths, and one right outside the bike shop that I was going to. So it's a 2-lane road, and there's often cars that are parked in the 1 lane, which if you're a cyclist requires you to either take the sidewalk, which has its own challenges for a bike and is illegal.
Oh, actually, is it 4 lanes and then most of that time it's parked? So it's like
parked.
It's really 2 lanes most of the time.
Right. So when you're a cyclist in that environment where you have a 2-lane road and sometimes you have parking in the 1 lane, what the cyclist might want to do is take the rightmost spot when it's available, but then come out when the parked cars are there. The problem with that approach is you're very unpredictable. Like I was saying right off the top, you need to be very predictable, right? I need to be able to see when I'm in my car. If I see a cyclist, I need to know what they're going to do, and I need to know when they're going to move. And I would actually rather they didn't move. Like, I don't mean like stop. I mean like take a line and stay on that line, because then I know what you're going to do. So when I'm on that road, I'm not going to touch that right lane. If it's frequently interrupted by parked cars, I'm taking the left lane. And this gets at the heart of, why do cyclists ride up the middle of the road all the time? Well, it's because the rightmost lane is full of garbage, or in this case, parked cars. So I would be in the left lane and I would be going, cycling speed, which for me is like probably, 25, 27 if I'm trying to get somewhere, which is still slower than what a car wants to do, right? Which is still moving for a bike, but slower than their car wants to do. But I would be in that left lane so that I'm not always,
coming in and out of traffic,
weaving in and out.
And the other side of things is when you do that, which is what some people do want. They're like, hey, the drivers, they're like, hey, don't take the lane, do the weaving. And then you do that, and then the drivers say, well, now you're weaving in and out of traffic.
Yeah, you're weaving in and out of traffic. You're so unpredictable. I had no idea where you were going to go.
You should be more predictable. It's like, you can't win. You actually can't.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So,
without the proper infrastructure.
So, I mean, the right thing to do always is what's safest for me. That sounds selfish, but sorry, I'm the vulnerable road user out there in that situation. So it's what's safest for me. And what's safest for me in that situation is being predictable, taking the law is, the way the law is written, it says, go to the right, as far right as practicable. Those are literally the words out of the Highway Traffic Act. That doesn't mean go to the right. That means go as far to the right as what makes sense. If the right lane is completely potholed and full of glass, as it is often on garbage day, then that's not practicable,
Yep.
to coin a phrase. And so I will not choose that right lane, right? But and if there's parked cars there, obviously I don't want to weave. I'm also worried about doors opening, right? So I need to stay sort of outside what we call the door zone. That happened to me as a kid. I didn't know about door zones as a kid. I was just going down a hill full of parked cars and somebody opened the door and I went right into it. And all that guy said was, I'm really sorry, I didn't see you. And he's told the truth.
Yeah, no,
I wasn't hurt, but I did literally fly off because as soon as the door opened, what I did was I turned into the car. So I actually came into this person's leg and I ended up flying off my bike and landing on top of the car that he was parked in front of. So I actually didn't hurt myself.
I was going to say that actually is a good take on that, because if you hit the edge of the car, you can stab yourself, like that corner of the door.
That's what I was trying to avoid. I also, it's not like I was thinking quickly. I literally was reacting, but I didn't want to veer into traffic.
That would also make sense. Good job.
So I wasn't targeting the guy who was trying to hurt me, but that was the target in the end. It seemed like a softer thing to hit than the door or traffic.
That is fair.
So I'm mindful of door zones. I will, back to Hamilton Road. That's where I would be. And it's, again, when I think about, okay, I have to run this errand, that's going to require me to ride on this road. You know what? I have a car. I think I'll just take the car. And that's why I call myself a failed utility cyclist. So kudos to all the other people who precede me in your podcast, because they're much braver than I am.
But that's why I really wanted to have this chat, because I think there is a bit of geographic, you're kind of locked in when you're in Byron. So there is that.
Yeah. I have a great commute to work. My commute to work, the Thames Valley pathway goes all the way out to Byron. I'm about 5 minutes from that. I get on a multi-use path. I'm right by the river. It's a lovely ride in. And then I can even bring my bike right up to my desk as I work. So I have that. I don't have the parking issues. So commuting to work and back is actually not my challenge, right? It's all those errands.
Yeah, the other ones.
Yeah.
And so that is wonderful. And this is one of those cases where it's like, hey, a geographic problem for you for commuting is not one, because the TVP is it's not plowed. So in the winter, you may or may not, depending on climate change and lack of snow or a lot of snow, you may or may not be able to do that. But for, let's say, 10 months of the year, you're probably good.
Yeah, I could, if I really wanted to, I could bomb down Springbank Road, but it's not ideal. It's one of those situations where I would say, why would I do that? I think I'm just going to work from home today.
There we go. So there's that. But yeah, all of these small issues build up. And they can be overcome, and they have been elsewhere. And I mean, bike theft elsewhere is also a thing in the Netherlands, etc. If we're comparing an ideal infrastructure thing, it's okay, but then there's bike theft. But I would say that and this is a whole other topic, I won't even dive into it right now, but the style of bicycle there, it's not this is a many $1,000s of bicycle. Their
Right.
Canadian Tire bike is more of a, hey, here's a
Like a
from
big
what I've heard,
steel rig with fenders and a chain guard and all those lovely things.
the most practical utilitarian thing. It's not light.
Maybe I need one of those, but I'd still hate to lose it.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to lose it. So yeah,
I would love that thing.
yeah. Ooh, okay. So as we're wrapping up here, what I can advise is, so this is a whole other video I could make at some point about like, here are the best locking practices, etc. But having pinhead locks on your non-quick release wheels. So I don't know if you're
mine are through axle, so they're not quick release, but they're not slow release.
Yeah. So they're medium release. You have to have the right tool, which
the tool's usually right on the wheel there for you, though.
So there's that. So, and for recreation, that makes sense. And so, yeah, let's say your other commuter bike that if you were to leave it somewhere, you have pinheads on there. So then you just need you have the least amount of friction possible. You have a U-lock and you take that out, you lock up your bike real quick and you wander into the store. That's my objective when I'm biking and doing utility cycling. Like, I want it to be as easy as jumping in a car, at least as close to that as possible. And actually, I think we've succeeded so much so that now it is more practical and more efficient than driving because the parking lots are always so busy. And we're like, bye. And we have bike racks at the stores that we go to typically, let's say for grocery things or other things, or we ask and we bring the bike in, or like Home Depot, we often just roll the bike right in and we get weird looks from the employees and we just go with confidence. And we
just walk the bike in. I do that too at restaurants a lot. I'll just walk in and just say, hey, I'm out on the patio, but you have to walk through the restaurant to get to the patio. You mind if I carry my bike through? Like, I'm that guy now. I don't care.
Yeah. And also, if you do it with enough confidence, people don't really care that much. And maybe they do. And then you vacate the premises. And
the worst case scenario is I'm bringing awareness to a gap in their accessibility. And I hope someday it comes up in a meeting. But talking about making it easy to get on and off the bike at your destination, and this was a big deal for my eldest son. Every time he would be like, "Okay, Dad, I'm gonna," he would come to me and just tell me, "I'm gonna bike here. It's gonna be awesome, right? Because we like this." But then I would start to say things like, well, where are you going to park? And do you have a lock? And it's going to be dark when you're coming home, so make sure you have lights, et cetera, like all the things. And all I'm doing is adding friction to the process and creating reasons and a big deterrent to doing it. So I did two things for Morgan's bike. Number one, I equipped it with little rim dynamo lights that just light up when the wheel spins.
That's
right?
Awesome. I love those.
So that was thing number one. Now I'm not worried. Now that's not like a headlight that you can see in pitch darkness, right? But it is a light that makes you visible, especially in sort of the evening. So that made him feel good because it wasn't something he had to remember to do, right? Oh, my light's charged.
Their friction point. Yeah, no, it's a big deal. It really is.
And then the other thing was a frame-mounted thing for his lock. So, it just took, most bikes usually, within the triangle support 2 water bottle cages, right? Most utility cyclists only need 1, if any. So we just mounted the lock right to his frame. So it's always there. It wasn't a case of where did I put my lock? And maybe Dad brought the lock somewhere. Maybe it's on his bike somewhere or in one of his many bike bags. So it doesn't become this thing, right? It's just no, that lock belongs to that bike. That bike is ready to go all the time. And when I started to do that, he took his bike everywhere all the time. And I just thought and for both of us, we were both pats on the back. We fixed a problem, right? He recognized he was using his bike a lot more. I recognized that I had removed some barriers. And so that was a win, right? That was, now of course all the other challenges still exist, but I think making the bike sort of ready to go, just like a car, right? I get in the car, turn the key, it's ready to go. I don't have to be like, where's my windshield wiper fluid? Every time I go drive, maybe I have to think about, do I have gas in the car? But that's it. So
yeah, I agree. Exactly what you did there is getting it. If you take nothing else out of this conversation, take that out. It's remove all the friction points that you can, because there's already going to be other friction points. Where do you lock this, that? But if you bike enough places, enough times, you'll figure out where where to park or where you'll figure everything out.
Optimize.
Yeah. But with that, putting it on the frame, this lock belongs here. That I fully agree. And then, yes, the dynamo lights, which if people don't know, those are when you pedal, it powers it.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways that can happen. The expensive way is to put it in the hub, right? And that's not what we did here. It was this is like a $30, $40 part, and it sits right next to the aluminum wheel rim. So it mounts on the front fork of the bike, for example, and it sits right next to the aluminum wheel rim. Generates like this little dime-sized gap. Generates a current that powers the light that's mounted on the basket.
That is so cool. I didn't even know those existed.
Yeah, it's called a rim dynamo, and so it's something I use for overnight rides, right? Just as a little solution that I found, so that I wouldn't have to get the expensive hub dynamo.
Yeah. Which is when you said that, I thought that that's what you had installed, and now you're telling me there's something.
That's something
cheaper.
I would need for like the overnight rides I do. That's a hardcore solution for just somebody who I'm like, it's sunset, you need lights.
Yeah. I love that though. That's so cool. I'm glad I asked about that because I did not know those existed.
Yeah, they don't work with carbon wheels because there's no current coming off carbon. That's a rich person's problem. Every other wheel, it's a good solution for. And
I need to take a moment and give it. Oh, it's actually right over there. I forgot to plug it in. So whoops.
Are you going to be able to get to where you want to go?
Thank you. I think I'll still have enough charge. My bike is getting repaired by Alex, or getting a tune-up, we'll say, while we're doing this, which is...
bike batteries is something I don't have to think about, but I do have to consider charging everything else.
Yeah. Actually, so out of everything, the e-bike having a singular battery that you charge, and that's the only thing you have to think of.
Does it power all the lights? And
it powers everything. So it is actually really nice. It powers the everything. So you just have to think about that, and you get your lock, which you either leave on your bike, like you said, or in your panniers, and that's that. Done. So I really do like that aspect.
So the long distance endurance cycling that I do right now, we don't use powered bicycles as part of the sport. It has to be under your own power. But there are a lot of the cyclists that don't have that hub dynamo, which is convenient, but they will have a battery on their bike. And the battery is powering their headlights. It's charging their Garmin. So it's serving a nice utility function. So they can ride through the night with confidence, knowing like I'm not gonna, my batteries and my lights aren't gonna die because I have this, 10,000 milliamp hour thing stuck to my frame that is at least doing inline charging, and at most I'm just gonna stop for a coffee at 3 a.m. at a Circle K and sit there and charge something for 20 minutes.
I like that.
What a strange lifestyle.
That singular one though is great. And yes, most people are not going to be doing long range biking. Actually, that is a disadvantage of an e-bike, I'm going to say. For most e-bikes, they're not going to charge up in that amount of time. And you can, with some of the cargo bikes like the one that I have, you actually can put like 2 big batteries. But if you are covering the amount of distance at the speed that you are like going, which is, would you say you average, I don't know, I'm trying to think for long distance. This is not me not knowing. I'm going to guess 25 kilometers an hour, or is it actually faster?
If I'm going anywhere if I'm doing like over 100 kilometers in a specific ride, I'm not going to ride much faster than 25 kilometers an hour because I have to actually get there, right?
exactly. Yeah,
I have to go at an all day pace.
Yeah, if you can obviously go way faster if you're on a shorter distance. So with that in mind, the speed at which you're going, the additional weight of an e-bike, etc., and the fact that you can just use your legs, like that is like within the city, e-bikes are awesome. If you have multiple batteries to swap out or this or that, and then at a destination, you get to the other side 100 kilometers away, then you have to charge up. So there's that. However, that is not most people. If you
An e-bike would be great for getting around the city, particularly for commuting, because when I commute, I'm consciously not riding at sort of an elevated heart rate because I don't want to get to work all sweaty, right? Yeah, I have showers where I work, another privilege I have, but I want to get to work and I want to work. I don't want to have to, again, I'm removing friction, right? So I take it easy on the way in, and then on the way home, I arrive home in a disgusting mess because why not?
It is that. Okay, so I think we'll close up probably on that because even with rain,
I'm a disgusting mess. We'll close up on that.
No, what I was going to get at though is we do the same thing. So when I say we, my wife and I, Natalia, we think the same way. And it's if you're going to work, one, the e-bike can help, blah, blah, blah. But 2, if you have an acoustic bike, when you're going to work, try to not sweat. And if it's not raining, that's ideal. And if you just need that 30-minute, whatever, how long it takes you to commute, 30-minute span of time. If it doesn't rain, that's great. You can put on some rain gear. You go slightly slower, but then you don't sweat. Like, it's a balance. But on the way back, it doesn't matter. So really, because you can just hop in the shower on the way back, throw your clothes in the laundry, you're good. But it's just that one time per day if you're commuting to work. If it, like, ideally it's not raining and it's not
and in the summer
hot.
If I'm coming to work in the summer in the morning, it's not that hot yet.
Yep.
So and it's actually quite cool. It feels good to ride in, and I'm wearing appropriate work clothing like this. Now on the way home, so it's 4:30, 5 o'clock. It's hot.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so I might, if I'm wearing something like this, I might have a t-shirt underneath. So I'll take this off. I'll throw it in my backpack. It'll be wrinkly as heck when I get home. Who cares? But I will just ride home hard. And yeah, it's hot and I'm gross, right? But at least I'm not coming to work at 30 degrees. And that's in the summer. I also have the benefit of a hill to climb away from the river getting home, whereas getting to work, I'm going to the river, which involves a nice, glorious descent. So
that is awesome.
It's just, again, the geography decides that for me. But I work with it.
Yeah. Like there's always those solutions. That's what we can end on, is the solutions to problems. Once you kind of figure this out.
I think you need to actually make the decision. Like, this is something I want to do. This is a way I want to live. What are the barriers that are preventing me from making that more possible, right? And I've talked about some of my barriers, and these are still things that I've got to work through, right? Like I appreciate the advice on more securely locking my bike or finding another bike that's lock worthy. These are the things I'm going to work on. So these are barriers I'm gonna work on. And I think if everybody wants to make that decision to do this more, just figure out what are the things that are in the way, and one by one tackle them. Right back to the kids biking to school. What are the things that are in their way? What can we do about those? We're not going to solve that problem today, but I think we can identify that the solution is figure out what the barriers are, stack them up, figure out which ones you can solve, right, and just start knocking them down.
Okay, there's always one more thing. Oh my goodness, this is like the 10th final thing. But I think when you decide to do this, someone who might otherwise not think of, hey, bike, I want a bike. If they're sitting in traffic and it becomes a massive pain point where it's my goodness, I am sitting in traffic and they're watching these people go by in the bike lane.
I'm one of the persons that just flies by and puts that idea in their head going, I could be like Fred.
We all want to be like Fred. No, that's actually another reason we try to get out on our bikes as much as possible for just everyday things.
Just to be visible.
Yes, I want people to see that and be envious. And so we're always trying to wear the most normal clothes and be like, hey, like, we're not sweating, and we're young professionals that are.
Yeah, I stop at stop signs and put my foot down and look at people, and
exactly.
Cyclists do stop. But you were saying about what's it's going to take to get somebody to sort of like cross over, I guess, right?
And sometimes it is the pain of traffic. So people complain about traffic and they have metrics of, like the construction in London is really bad and blah, blah, blah. There's all that. Yeah, it is. Traffic's pretty bad. I don't know, though. Have you been to Toronto? Like, if you haven't, you can't really complain that much about London traffic, in my opinion. I've driven here a lot, too. And
I don't enjoy driving. Like this, it's not something that I'm like passionate about doing. I find when I'm driving a car, people do things that while I'm driving, people around me do things that make me kind of angry. And it's not every single trip, but I just find when I'm done running an errand by car, I'm usually like, there's somebody who didn't handle a roundabout properly, or somebody who rolled through a stop sign when I had the right of way. Just little things like that. When I'm on a bike, that stuff, if it happens, I don't care afterwards, because I find the entire process of being on a bike much more stress relieving. When I'm in my car, it's like it's all contained in that cabin. And so generally, I just find the experience to be much more pleasurable. And that's why I try to do it more. And I would encourage anybody to try that, right? Just to make that, make that the way that you go and do something. And then ask yourself, was that a more enjoyable experience than had I driven?
I like that. And that might be the close right there.
There we go. There's now one more thing.
That after the 20th, one more thing, we are now done. So thank you very much for listening. and watching, or whichever one you did. Was there anything you wanted to cover other than that?
Okay. That's it.
We're good. Thank you very much for sitting with me here and chatting.
Thanks. This is a great opportunity.
Yeah.